1/5 of the Ukrainian territory stays with Russia. I think there was a photo op in which somebody was recording, which they were not aware. And then one of them got up, he fixed his dress and again covered himself and slept, just to show that these many have been killed. 1st of December onwards, you are going to see the onset of the winter coming in. That's hardly 60 days away. And Russians will have a greater weapon to unleash on the Europeans if he blocks the energy supply. And if he blocks the energy supply, the heat of the war may rise here, but nothing heats up in Europe.
Hello, a very good evening. A very good evening. Welcome back to Swarajya Conversations. I'm really privileged to be joined by Dr. Nanda Kishor from Pondicherry University. Sir, namaskara. Thank you so much for giving us your time today to discuss the Ukraine-Russia conflict and its current trends.
Thank you, Sharan. It's my pleasure always to be associated with you and the type of work that you do.
Thank you so much, sir. Very kind of you. Sir, I thought we will use this occasion to actually discuss the current trends in the conflict. Because if it's for one thing, I think there's a lot of dilemma and there's a lot of confusion surrounding the actual facts of the conflict. Now, obviously, only once a conflict has ended, there are two, three versions of the story which comes out, both from the sides of the victors and from the sides of those who have lost the war. But in this case, everybody claims that they are winning the war. So, how do you separate that fact from fiction?
Thank you. I think that's a very pertinent as well as an interesting question. One is that somehow it's one versus the other sort of a scenario that we see here, where the Russian media is absolutely what has it has been put to a side where you don't have an access itself. Let's take India for example. You don't have an access to Russian TV or any other possible outlet that can actually give you some sort of an information or some sort of an understanding of what's happening between Russia and Ukraine. What all you get to hear is a Ukrainian version, and Ukraine seems to be using the PR heavily, and it's been able to even get away with a lot of things that are possible. Right now, in such a scenario, there is only one way we keep telling, even in research methodology. One of the ways of dealing with is triangulating. That means you need to look at different sources. There are also certain countries which might be neutral, might not be neutral, but at least they're not siding with either of those. There are few states at least who are still trying to report on some of these facts. And there are also independent researchers who are putting it up in blogs, who are also able to access to some of the satellite data and other things. So from those and the understanding that I've had, there's no doubt that there has been some inroad made by the Ukrainians, and there seems to be some sort of, I would want to use the German term, that's blitzkrieg. There is some amount of blitzkrieg that's
Yeah.
been shown. It was a very coordinated attack, assisted by the Americans with regard to intelligence, when the Russians were perhaps partially relaxing. Partially, they were thinking from the perspective that this might be a time when they are making inroads. So, day by day, they're capturing more and more territories and other things. They were taken by surprise, absolute surprise, and then there was a coordinated attack. It is precisely because of this, let's say, closer to a dozen of cities
Right.
and few spaces that have been covered, which was absolutely through surprise only, nothing more than the
But
element of
would you
surprise is
say
not
that this
new
is
in
a
war.
minor setback or a major, trial for the Russians in this case?
Oh, given the sort of power that they were enjoying, or given the sort of status that they were enjoying, for everybody, they would want to hear and they would also want to propagate this as failure. But the statistics says still 1/5 of the Ukrainian territory stays with Russia, and Russia will not back off so easily. And Russia is also trying to bring the mercenaries. If Ukrainians are taking help of the West and they're taking help of whatever other possible groups that are available, the Russians are going to take help from the mercenaries and they're going to unleash in different way. Russia is also looking at Belarusia and trying to strengthen, because it is it is planning to use that territory as well, bordering Ukraine, to see to it that they are they are actually sending some sort of a signal saying that, one, don't test me too much, I can also come back strong.
Right.
But for sure, because of the asymmetry that remains between Russia and Ukraine, everybody wants to hear, and they would love to hear the word that Russians are actually losing, or Russians have been shown
Yeah.
their plays, or Russians are on the backside, or backtracking. This is what everybody would want to. I don't deny significant gain in the terms of what they have lost, rather than saying that they have been able to capture all those very important areas. I don't think they've been able to get very important areas, but some, let's say half a dozen or a dozen places
Right.
that they've been able to capture.
Another question that's been repeated time and again is that can the Russians continue to afford this? And there have been different sets of answers. And I think this question holds relevance because this has become a protracted battle where it's going on and on and on. So, on the long run, can the Russian economy actually sustain this sort of warfare?
See, I have a different answer to this one. Among all the currencies, generally the rule of the war is that war causes inflation. War, in long term, has heavy problems that they may not be able to sustain. They will be collapsing, or economically it's not viable, which is a known factor. But in this case, though, if we may not know exact amount of money that's been spent by the Russians, and then what has been recovered on both the fronts, we need to know. Let me give this example. Among all the countries as of now, if you look at the currency, most of the currencies have been depreciating. They have not been able to do well, including that of Indian rupee. We know what is happening between
Correct.
Indian rupee and the dollar. Surprisingly, this fact comes as a rude shock to a lot of those who are trying to propagate Ukraine as a liberal state and what Russia is doing is wrong. The Russian currency is doing marvelously well, and it sounds to be very healthy. That's where I said, what if the Russians are using old arms and ammunitions that have been laying in the dock for a very, very long time? They may not be using the fresh ones. And everybody knows the type of stockpile and the arms race that we have had in the Cold War era and then subsequently. And there is no time that anybody has got to use them. That's a case with a lot of countries who have been in arms race. So
Right.
for me, that number we have not been able to arrive. No independent scholar or no organization also is able to arrive at. So far, if you look at the permutation combinations and you look at the debit credit component or the expenditure component, nobody is able to arrive at and say. They're able to say, okay, because of the war, what had been the condition of who's losing how much outside Russia's preview. What Russia is not sending something, or it has
Yeah.
cut off a supply line to Ukraine, and what is the loss and other things. But what exactly is the loss for Russia? If you look in, nobody able to consolidate and tell this one. What they've
Right.
been asking, like you, is that, is this war viable? How
Mhm.
long the Russians can actually carry on the offensive, and how long they can sustain, has
But there
been
is a
one
very confident
question.
statement coming from the Western press, especially saying that the cost of human capital is way too much for Russia. And if you look at the number of lives that have been claimed by the Ukrainian army, as far as the Russian defense is concerned, goes up to
Hmm.
40,000, 50,000, and the number keeps on inflating every time we check it.
I do understand on that part, but as I keep on insisting, the propaganda machinery is too strong in this front. If you look in initially, Zelensky played a different game where he tried showing that the Russians have been on an offensive, and Ukrainians are, let's say, common Ukrainians have been killed, and Russia is merciless and all those things. There was a photo op in which somebody was recording, which they were not aware, and then one of them got up. He fixed his dress and again covered himself and slept, just to show that these many have been killed. So I also see a partial portion of the propaganda that wants to bring in sympathy, and then people should see Putin as a villain. He's already a villain. That was the first war that Ukrainians were able to win, because nobody knew about Zelensky before this, and everybody knew about Putin as a too strong guy or a problematic guy, because somebody being in power from 1999, you know what he is, and he has seen so many presidents, he has seen so many leaders in different parts of the world. and he is constant, right? He's like the science formula that we talk about, other things remaining constant. So Putin is a constant factor here. So
Mm,
partial propaganda, but human losses for sure, it will be there. There is no way one can say there's no human loss at all. But given the type of full-fledged war, what it would cause, this is a very limited war. It's not a
right.
full-fledged war. So it's a limited war, and there are casualties that are there. But the thing is, we really don't know whether they have been Russian soldiers or they are mercenaries.
Okay.
That has also not been very very clear, and what they're doing too. But whatever the cost is with regard to the human capital, I don't deny about that front. uh, it is something that the Russians are also worried about, no doubt, but that does not deter them from the perspective that they're going to, something is phenomenal going to happen. Let's say the
Yeah.
Russo-Japanese war that happened in the early 1900s, right, where the Japanese claimed the victory and something happened, though they could not occupy any territory or anything of that sort. Even then, it was spoken about, right? Second World War, it was spoken about. Every now and then, it's been spoken about. Even when they went to Afghanistan, it was the same case, right? I'm pretty sure that this one is not greater than the Afghanistan one, 79 to 89. And
Yes.
they've lost considerable number of people every now and then. It's been the case. But that alone, I don't think is a major case of concern. But he understands what he thought as a limited war, what he thought as a quick war that he would be able to wrap up,
Right.
was, I have said even before, that there Putin overestimated his forces capability, but at the same time he underestimated Ukraine's resistance.
Right.
Both have been a factor here. So that has
Yeah.
boomerang to an extent where
Because
he thought he
I
would be
think they
able to
still
wrap up
continue
by.
to call this a military operation, and they're not acknowledging this as a
Yeah,
war.
that might be a hermeneutics that he wants to use. He would not want to call it as a war. He would still want to call it as an operation, because
Right.
behind the idea of operation is liberation. He's trying to be that messiah who's liberating a particular territory, who's liberating a section of population from a regime that is not supposed to be there. That's a view that he wants to give. But for us,
Right.
we can take it as sub-conventional level. That's what we
He
can
also
analyze this
used
as.
the N word, sir. So, as far as those nuclear threats are concerned, how do you read into that?
Hmm. No, see, nuclear part is little problematic, because if you look at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which has been captured by the Russians as of now, where the Ukrainians continue to work, but the Russians have seized it. Now, it's a very dilemma sort of a scenario, because if Russians do anything, for them it's a strategic asset. They should never be doing that one, because their exterior hard work is the one that has been an outcome of whatever that they are seeing there. They would not want to do that one. Now, the Ukrainians try doing anything. The workers inside and all those people in that particular town, closer to 40,000, have vacated. Whatever the remaining in and around those people are there, it will be genocidal, because they themselves will be killing. I see very, very less possibility of anything happening like that. But what I see is, in the form of an accident, something is shown where each side blames the other. If at all an accident, nuclear accident can happen, then it will be disastrous. It's going to be very, very threatening, and it's going to be problematic. But knowing that nuclear weapon possessing states, however we try ridiculing whatever we do, whether it is Pakistan, whether it is North Korea, whether it is Israel or anyone, even to the highest possible level, I don't think the nuclear threshold where we have gone up till there, we have not been able to escalate from subconventional to conventional war itself. So question of nuclear, I don't really see a possibility. So it's been
Okay.
like that of, let me give an example to make this point more pertinent.
Okay.
If you remember, when during our studies and your studies as well, most of the time one of the hot topics used to be that the weapons of mass destruction getting into the hands of the
Yes.
terrorists and WMD, that used to be a hot topic.
Yes.
Till date, we haven't seen terrorists using WMD. This is some sort of propaganda that regularly comes in to make it to look like, because you need a narrative. You need a narrative to make somebody look bad, and nuclear is the easy target. And simply tell like this, that there are possibilities that he may nuke them. I'm pretty sure that he's not interested in nuking them. If he wanted to, He could have used all those missiles that he has. I don't think he's interested in that one. I don't think he's that sort of a senseless leader who will ever do. If Pakistani leadership hasn't done, I don't think Putin will ever do.
And how do you see this progressing in the near future, sir? What are the
Now I
options for both Ukraine and
See,
Russia?
now I see that the Russians are gathering and then they are trying to use different channels. One is through Belarusia. They're going to use Belarusian space, and they're going to use their territory, and then they're going to have some operations. And there are non-weapon options as well, non-military options that are available, that are in front of Russia. As our foreign minister had openly criticized the Europeans, now the Europeans will face the real tune of it. That means 1st of December onwards, you are going to see the onset of the winter coming in. That's hardly 60 days away.
Yes,
And Russians will have a greater weapon to unleash on the Europeans if he blocks the energy supply.
right,
And if he blocks the energy supply, the heat of the war may rise here, but nothing heats up in Europe. So he knows how to rise the emotional heat there if they try acting something over smart. So what happens is, if he raises the energy cost, there's nobody to replace. That is one. Second part is that once the energy prices start going up, if you look in the whole argument, and the crisis that UK saw is all about the energy bills, that the current prime minister is also trying to what is a cap, and then trying to do, because it's going like a rocket. So now the Europeans will be forced to pay more for the energy, which in turn will start making them to think that how much they can contribute to Ukraine, and then help Ukraine to do something against Russia. That's his first weapon that he's going to use.
right,
Second option that he has is one of the weapons that we talk about, is called as the 2S4. That is called as the tube-plan weapon, which is, as I have mentioned before as well, it's a 240 self-propelled heavy mortar having range of around 9,650 meters, which with some more assistance and other things, it can go up till 20,000 meters. It's been the most deadliest weapon, and the Ukrainians have feared this for a very, very long time. And in fact, all those midway through offense that Russia was able to use and capture a lot of territories, as the one fifth I mentioned to you, from Donbass to all those very important places of Izium, Kupiansk, all these places have been absolutely because of this 2S4. Now, for sure, I feel that because suddenly people have started speaking about that the Russians are gaining, and now they're almost winning the war, and that sort of a narrative they're trying to push. By knowing Putin, and having studied a bit of political psychology and knowing how he behaves, he's going to unleash that part. That is the second component of this. Third part is going to make the Ukrainians to go hell through the electric supply. Now, what he's going to do is, from
right.
the Clausewitzian term, I can draw the center of gravity, and the center of gravity, what he thinks is that energy supply is the core, and if we can target the energy supply, then half of the things will come to standstill. So he is going to, already he has used this as modus operandi, mo, specifically targeting power plants, specifically targeting the power stations. He is going to unleash that much more, so that many of the cities will black out, many of them will suffer, and he's going to sit and witness that one, and he's going to reduce the Ukrainians, because how much ever you try, you may supply weapons to them. How do you supply energy to them? How do you restore these power houses and power stations? How
Yeah.
are you going to do that one? So that is an option that is available with him, which is going to do.
Okay.
But the Americans are climbing in a different perspective, which perhaps I may say so. Like they are saying that Kharkiv is going to be is already being freed. That's what the U.S. claim has been. Apart from what U.S. intelligence, if you look in one of the interviews of Anthony Bilkins, he was U.S. Secretary of State. He was telling that 400 ammunition spots of the Russians have been unearthed, and we have been able to have a strategic victory over the Russians, and then they have stepped back, is what he's claiming. Then you have Mark Milley, the chief of staff of the United States U.S. Army. He has also been saying that they've been trying to give advanced weapons, supplying them intelligence, and all these things. With a coordinated effort, they will be able to teach a lesson to the Russians. And third is what they're saying is Kupiansk. I mentioned before itself. It's a railway hub, and it's also a key logistical center. And they're saying that has been cut off, so the Russians will suffer now. Russians will not be able to coordinate. Apart from the claims that are made by Hannah Malya, she is the defense minister of Ukraine. Even she's been saying the same thing, that in fact, she's been much more realistic. Unlike the US and many others, she's been openly saying that we've been able to make some inroads, but there is a lot more to do. At least we have been able to bring back people to their houses in few places, as I said, that a dozen cities in which they've been able to restore. But how do you restore? They have to be in alternate camps. The cities have been
Yeah.
razed down, and they've been in trouble. So these have been something that they've been telling. This is where I'm seeing the projection.
Okay.
But Russians will bounce back. Russians will not that easily accept. But it is one versus all, that sort of a
Definitely.
scenario. The whole of NATO supporting. You have the
Historically, also, if we
Americans.
look at it, it's only during the winters that Russians have been able to make a lot of gains.
That might be one of the tactics of he laying low. He knows
Right.
that once the winter comes in, and the offensive that he's going to draw is going to be lethal on the
Yeah.
Ukrainians. So he might be just borrowing time. It's a hardly matter of another 60 days.
Yeah.
But as we see, anything is possible in these type of scenarios. If at all further coordinated actions, some more blitzkrieg, and some more maneuvering that the Ukrainians are able to bring forth with some support and other things, there can be a possibility of capturing some more areas and some more strategic locations, and certain of those things can happen. But come
Yeah.
what may, it's not a good thing. As our prime minister said, this is not the time, because we all struggled, the whole world struggled under COVID-19. And just now we are trying to declare, though the Chinese are not able to. The Chinese president is still maintaining distance from people, because he's still scared that he might end up spreading to someone else. But others are claiming that we, to an extent, we have won the COVID, and we should bounce back now. The world should come out of the financial crisis and other things. But a war can be humongous, and it can cause.
Yeah.
There are so many causal relations that are available, right? Push and pull factors
Yes.
that can really hurt the progress that the world could have perhaps made. Is a concern
Yeah.
that I see in this war.
So initially, there was a lot of fear, especially in parts of Eastern Europe, that should the Russians capture Ukraine, it is going to be a massive existential threat to a large part of Europe. Do you think that threat perception exists even now? Because if we look at this in two aspects, one is that the popular support for the war has always been questionable when it comes to UK, US, and the campaigns that they've led in the Middle East and in other regions of the
Hmm.
world. And secondly, as soon as Liz Truss got elected a few days ago, she made a commitment that UK is not going to pull out till Ukrainians win this particular battle. So, as far as that is concerned, what would you say about that?
See, the more they persist, the more trouble going to be. In the sense, though, on the one hand, everybody should join and everything. Uh, Now that the type of pressure that we saw that came up in SEO, and the way even Putin admitted, saying that one is not too keen, that he wants to drag this, or he wants to push this to the brink or anything of that sort. But until and unless, see, his own legitimacy will be questioned if he doesn't get what he wants to out of this one. But at the same time, he is also not too concerned. I think his move has been absolutely tactical, from the perspective he knows what he wants. Apart from that, I don't think he's interested in the whole of Ukraine. He wants certain strategic spots, he wants certain strategic locations, which he has
Okay,
already got to an extent. Now the idea is only to maintain, right? He is not expanding, but Ukrainians want to push them back and take back what he has got. I think what he wanted to, he has achieved. Though the time has been
Right.
beyond what he anticipated, where he anticipated it to be March, but it has come till September. But objectives have been fulfilled. He has got those places which were very important for him, the port perspective, the nuclear plant, all those things which are very, very important. He has already got them. Now his component is to sustain and be there. The Ukrainians will not allow that to happen. That means, indirectly, what I'm trying to tell is, it will not be Russia that will prolong the war, but it will be Ukraine that will prolong the war. But how I'm
Right.
saying is also interesting. When I say the Russians are not prolonging the war, the Ukrainian perspective of ending the war is that the Russians leave complete Ukraine and go back to Russia.
Right.
According to them, that's the end of war. For Russia, the Ukrainians should settle with whatever the Russians have got. Let's make peace out of it, and remaining, let's not allow them to go on and capture, which is not acceptable on both the sides.
Right.
Neither Putin is going to keep quiet if these people want to take it back. Ukrainians are not going to keep quiet till they would get the remaining territory, because
Right.
Crimea story is over. Crimea's was much quicker, faster, tactical, strategic. He got everything. And then they could not make the way they have made as of now. But now the Ukrainians are clear that if they start living like this, he will go on eating every portion, and then nothing will be left for them. So
Yeah.
where I simply emphasize and say, both the sides have their own ways of telling. It's like the Israel and Palestinian story, right?
Right.
Israel will say that all that region belongs to us and allow us to be peaceful where we are. Palestinians would say nothing like it. We would want to restore everything before 1948.
Yeah.
So both sides is not going to happen. That means both are interested in taking it forward. There is no median that they can arrive. Now, even somebody has to go and negotiate. How will they negotiate? As the way they look at Russia, the negotiation point would start that apart from Crimea, whatever that had happened, okay, that has happened. We are not going to push that one because that is going to be offensive on Russia. Rest all, whatever the new things that have happened from Feb, leave all those things and go back. That's what the negotiators or anybody who's come in between are going to tell Russia.
Right.
Do you think Russia will ever agree on those terms? That
Of
will be a
course not.
problem. Ukraine, if Russia agrees to any of those terms, next Ukraine will raise the ante and say, now we want Crimea as well.
Mm.
So Putin has already gone 5 steps further, and he has already anticipated these type of move.
Right.
That's why he's neither allowing anybody else to negotiate, nor he's telling them that he is too keen to continue with this one. He's telling, I do understand your concerns. I also want to put an end to the war, but there is a footnote to that one. He says, whatever I've got now, let them cede it to me. Remaining, I will not trouble them in the future. But the Ukrainians will say, this is what he had said when he took over Crimea. Now
Yeah.
he has come back. Where is the guarantee is going to end? So it has a spiraling effect. It's an action reaction cycle that's not going to stop
Yeah.
because of the perception misperception issues that we see in international relations.
It'll be very interesting to see what happens because I'm sure by November, December, there'll be a lot more that's going to change in terms of who's gaining and who's losing.
Exactly.
Sir, thank you so much for joining me today. It's always good to connect with you.
Always my pleasure.
Thank you so much, sir. And viewers, please do let us know what you thought about this. And if you have any questions for Dr. Nanda Kishore, please do type them out in the comment section below, and I'm sure he'll be happy to answer them.